Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Michael Wilcox. I am the Associate Director of the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. Really excited to have all of you here today. We've got an exciting presentation, and so I'll go ahead and read from my script here, and we'll go ahead and kick things off. Freely shared, widely adapted, First Impressions turns 35. Today we celebrate 35 years of First Impressions, an innovative program developed by the University of Wisconsin Extension in 1991 that has engaged hundreds of communities in the United States and Canada. Designed to help communities see themselves through a visitor's eyes, First Impressions has been freely shared and widely adapted to foster local engagement, placemaking, and economic vitality. This webinar today will explore the program's history, starting with the originators at the University of Wisconsin, highlight its adaptation and use at Kansas State and Iowa State universities, and discuss how its principles inspired a new approach to community improvement at Michigan State University. Our presenters today are Todd Johnson at the University of Wisconsin Extension, Kristen Runge at the University of Wisconsin Extension as well, Deborah Cole, Kansas State University Research and Extension, Ann Vogelbacher from Iowa State University Extension and Outreach, and Andy Northup from Michigan State University Extension. And we have an upcoming webinar that we wanted to remind everyone of next month. That's New Insights on Household Food Waste. It's going to be Wednesday, March 11th, 2026 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. It's a two-part webinar that will highlight the findings from a recent food waste reduction research project. Presenters will be Brian Rowe from Ohio State University and Brenna Ellison from the Center for Food Conservation and Waste Reduction at Purdue University. For more details about this webinar, please visit our NCRCRD website. And with that, I will hand things off to Todd.
And I'm going to hand things off to Kristen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's good to see you today. Thanks for joining in. We're really excited to have the opportunity to talk about this program that started in Wisconsin, but is very much a nationwide extension program that we have all contributed to and made it into the force that it is. So the quote that we're going to start out with today is, "You never get a second chance to make a first impression." And that is certainly true of this program and kind of what's at the heart of the program. So allow me to introduce myself. I'm Kristen Runge. I'm the program manager for the Community Economic Development Program at UW Extension. And prior to this, I was a specialist in community economic development. And I originally sat in Andy Lewis's desk when I took over his old role. So this program is near and dear to my heart. And I'd like to also introduce Todd Johnson, who is a community economic development specialist, our placemaking lead at Extension, and land use specialist as well. So thank you for joining in with us today. We're just going to give you a bit of an overview of the program. One of the things they asked us to talk about was the history of the program, talk a little bit about the impacts that it has, the purpose and the reason that Andy and James Schneider decided to launch this program, some of the lasting impressions that we've had, adaptations that have been made, and some observations. And then we'll hand it off to our partners to talk about how they have taken on the program and made it their own. So one of the issues that we had is, when you're in a community, we talk about it as the skewing of familiarization. We all walk through the communities that we're a part of. We tend to pay attention to the elements of the communities that we like and maybe not even notice the other aspects of the community. This program is a way of bringing a fresh set of eyes to a community, getting that first impression, that shopping experience, so that the community members understand how their community is initially perceived from outsiders. And with that, Todd, can I hand it over to you to talk about the work that you've done in documenting the origin of the program and talking with both James and Andy about how they arrived at the start of First Impressions?
I will give it my best shot here. Andy Lewis, he was the community development educator for Grant County back in the day. I actually held that position a few years ago as well. So I actually had Andy's old office and I actually lived in his old house. just by coincidence. But back in 1991, Andy and his friend James Schneider, who at the time was the director of Grant County Economic Development Corporation, had been partnering a lot on projects within Grant County and in the area, and they had seen a lot of the same issues and a lot of the same concerns. And over I think a couple of beverages, they sort of like came to the conclusion that maybe we should try to come up with something that is kind of like a secret shopper sort of model for looking at what makes for a first impression in any given community. And so that's exactly what they did. These two gentlemen got together and they said, let's create something that's really easy to do, but it's high impact, doesn't have to cost a lot, but gets good results. And so the purpose of their program was to help a community learn more about its existing strengths and weaknesses as seen through the eyes of a first-time visitor. It's meant to be an unbiased and unique perspective of the community prior to beginning any planning for the future. It's also supposed to be a structured opportunity to learn about the strengths and weaknesses of other similar communities, and it can serve as a basis for community action. And again, this is where this was the starting point of this program. It's definitely has some modifications and changes over time, but this is where they started. And then the process is how they envisioned it initially was that you'd have volunteers from two somewhat similar communities in size, location, maybe they're both a county seat, or maybe they both have a large manufacturing base or whatever it might be. Just try to find a couple of communities that are similar in some way. Agree to do an unannounced exchange of visits and then report on their findings. The idea is you'd have participants become secret shoppers for a day, and they'd walk around their sister city with a survey instrument of sorts, and basically fill out the survey, and then give that information back to the extension educator. They'd put up a nice report, and then they'd exchange those reports with one another in both communities. Now, initially, the idea was you have a small group of people, not like 30 people to get on a bus, but you train up 6 people on kind of the guidelines of the program, the purpose of the program, and make sure that the folks who are involved in this really know what they're looking for and understand the purpose of it. And so this is what their program kind of guidebook looked like. It was very simple, but pretty easy to use. It just gave a little bit of a background as far as what this is all about and some tips. Part of it was also taking photos. Sometimes they'd have disposable cameras that people would take and go and take pictures of, and then turn that into the educator, and they go and develop it. A lot of it though was just narrative and having people write down their impressions in sentence format. You know, what are you seeing and what is striking you as being of interest? And so they had these simple questions that they had, like, what is your perception before visiting the community? What did you expect to find? You know, that's one of the very first questions. They had the questions that have to do with walking around versus driving around. So some of this was done through a windshield, and other times it was face-to-face contact with maybe shopkeepers and store owners. But again, just looking at lots of different community infrastructure, neighborhoods, downtowns, shopping, stores, you know, entrances, exits, parking, playgrounds, you kind of name it. Just getting a smorgasbord of what does this community look like? What does it feel like? And what can we learn from it? So again, very, very simple stuff. Again, you can see some of these questions were about walking around versus driving around. And then a section on the very end for your final thoughts, you know, traveling as a tourist. Would you have stopped here and why? And why not? Would you come back? Why or why not? If you were looking at this through the eyes of a business or for the business community, what are some of your considerations that you would, what did you find appealing? What did you like about the shopping experience, or what would you like to have seen? Then looking at it as if you wanted to live there. So they had just different lenses in which you could summarize your thoughts. And again, this is very low tech, sheets of paper on clipboards, people walking around, right? And as far as like the impacts of this program, you know, we can look at and this is not a very scientific way of looking at it, by the way. This is Google searching only. But starting with Wisconsin here, if you do a Google search for first impressions, this is our website. If you use that QR code, that'll take you to it. And then from there, if you want to see the whole story, we have a video interview of Andy Lewis and James Schneider where they talk through why they created this program and how it came about. Plus, we have lots of different documentation of different versions of first impressions and examples and whatnot. So that QR code should take you there. If it doesn't, please send me an email and I'll try to get you there myself. But as you'll look through the list of different extension services around the country that have adopted this. And so you look at from Wisconsin, and we look at Connecticut, Kansas State, University of New Hampshire, Iowa State University, North Dakota State University, West Virginia State University, University of Central Arkansas, the Pennsylvania State University, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Michigan State University, North Carolina State University, University of Minnesota, The Ohio State University, Mississippi State University, University of Kentucky. And then we have national programs sponsored through USDA Rural Development. Then it has a connection with Kentucky. The National Scenic Byway Foundation has used First Impressions. Then we go up in Canada, we have Alberta, Canada, First Impressions Community Exchange Program. We have Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And then we have some others that are popping up in areas in Australia in the nonprofit sectors and for-profit as well. So that's where, at least when I did some Google searching, again, not the most scientific approach, but that's what I did. So that's what I found so far. If I'm missing some out there, please let me know. I'd love to add some stuff to this map. And then with that, there was some scholarship as well. A couple of journal articles are written for Journal Extension. And then I think I'm going to hand this off to Kristen.
So when we think about, some of the adaptations that have happened, in addition to the core first impressions spreading across the state, you even saw Australia and Canada on there. We have some alumni of Wisconsin that are working in community development in Australia. It was exciting to see them adopt the program. So some of the adaptations, and we have tourism assessment that we've seen Michigan State do, West Virginia University, North Carolina State, and the University of Minnesota. Community swap is similar, and that's from the University of Illinois Extension. University of Wisconsin, our own UW Extension, has a digital input version of First Impressions. And there's an interesting dialogue we've had over the years with Andy and James about the benefits of walking around with a clipboard versus walking around with a smartphone, in that a clipboard is very accessible to people from all ages and all backgrounds. The written impressions and the dialogue that happens from that is one of the core reasons they found value in the program. We have a Youth and First Impressions program that we have been doing lately, where we primarily work through our 4-H and our positive youth development to do youth exchanges in communities. And that's a really great way of helping to understand the perspective youth have on their own community as well as the community that they're visiting, and also helping to engage youth in the development of their community and give them a voice in how their community is shaped. And then we also have a First Impressions program for campuses. Campuses are such a big part of our communities, where if you have a university or a college campus in your community, it's a rather large portion of the community. And bringing First Impressions to that to understand how that happens has been really great. So in the future, we're now currently working on a placemaking and First Impressions program that is shaped around the placemaking principles that we all adhere to, and downtown and First Impressions, so focusing on that specific type of downtown neighborhood. One of the things that we've observed over the years, if you can go back, thank you. The simplicity of the program is what provides the flexibility for it. We're using regular citizens. There's a small amount of training that goes into it. The clipboard and paper version of the program really makes it accessible, as I said, to all ages and stages of life. There is an element of there in that simplicity that the group going out to a community together is also an incredibly social activity. It builds a lot of bonds. It really helps us engage community members in a way that we like to engage community members. The emphasis in the program is really placed on those stories that we tell ourselves about a place. So, we all come from a place or operate in communities where we have our own narrative about what that community means, why it's successful, or maybe why it's, has some challenges. To get that outsider perspective on the community and then have that shared dialogue back and forth in the moment when the two communities meet up either virtually or in person or exchange their information really does help to fill out that narrative and give us a different perspective on the communities. And the adaptations that make use of a Likert scale or other scale, we've had some kind of back and forth in our group about whether that's a good thing. Those numbers can feel very easy to work with if you're using a survey instrument as part of first impressions. But the storytelling and the dialogue is something that we really try to emphasize when we're doing it. Well, some of the other observations that we make, we use this a lot with new educators when we're onboarding people that are county or specialists. It's an easy program to understand, an easy program to start, and it helps build those relationships between extension educator and community, as well as extension educator and extension educator. So this is often for us a great onboarding program as part of our new colleague orientation. So the other observations we've made over the years with the program is we've had communities, this has been around long enough that we've had communities that have done it once and then have come back 10 or 15 years later to do it again. And so that institutional memory in the community where they have folks that remember doing it the first time or receiving the report and using the report to improve their community and come back a second time to do it years later is also to us a testament of the kind of the staying power of the program. So next one, Todd. And we were asked as part of this to comment on why it was offered without charge. Why didn't we license the program? And there's really two answers to that. First, the Wisconsin idea, articulated by, I think, 1904 by Charles Van Hise, who was the president of the university at time, that the University of Wisconsin, we shall never be content until the beneficent effect of the university reaches all of the corners of the state. That's the idea we operate on in extension and across the university system. And we extend that to say the borders of the country, the borders of the globe as well. So this program was very much offered out to the larger extension world in the spirit of the Wisconsin idea. The first reason. The second reason, in talking with Andy and James when they articulated it, one of the benefits of a successful program, one of the hallmarks of a successful program, there are many hallmarks, but one of them is that other people want to do it. And that this program was offered without charge is what has contributed to its success. It's easy for a community to pick up. It's easy for an extension to adopt because there's not a charge to doing it. There wasn't a licensing fee involved. And so that combination of hoping it spreads and that people find a way to use it and adapt it and improve it, as well as the Wisconsin RD, are really reasons it was offered without charge. So we were very excited about that. And it's great to see how people have across extensions picked this program up and ran with it and made it their own. All right. And so I am not sure, Michael, if we want to have discussion now or you want to hold questions until the end of all three presentations, but I want to thank everyone for listening to us today.
I appreciate that. I think the plan is that we're going to go ahead and move forward with everyone. Deborah needs to leave us at 1:00 Central Time, but she has plants in the room that are going to be available to answer questions as needed. So we'll go ahead and move to the next presentation. But thank you very much from our friends in Wisconsin. We'll look forward to the question and answer at the end. If you do have questions now and you want to put them in the chat, please feel free to do so. We will revisit those at the end of the presentation.
Can you see my slides? Can someone give me a thumbs up that we transitioned that well?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, it is an honor to represent the K-State Community Vitality Team and present this brief explanation of our take on first impressions. I think this will be a little bit more of the nuts and bolts and how we operate the program. So if you haven't done it, there'll be some good tips here for you. I'm Deborah Cole. I'm the state specialist and program leader coordinator for our community vitality team. And First Impressions has a long history in Kansas. Our records date back to at least 1998 in what we will call our analog era. Early presentations were conducted using 35 millimeter Kodak slides and carousel projectors. And Ron Wilson tells tales of sending extension volunteers out to do the evaluations and then 2 specialists compiling the reports. And then he would literally ride off into the sunset, maybe not on his horse, with the physical slide racks to share the visual findings with the community leaders. We moved into a digital era as technology advanced and the program transitioned from physical slide decks to digital photography and PowerPoint presentations, allowing for more efficient data sharing and reporting. And then we also have our virtual era. Recording some of the presentations back to communities are available because K-State pivoted, doing Zoom and Skype presentations in times of low budget where we couldn't travel as well as a specialist team, but also then COVID. In fact, if you're interested, you can grab copies of all of our reports from the website going back to about 2015. We make all of the data publicly available, both the written and the slide presentations that we give to communities. Our methodology has evolved a little bit over time as well. At the outset of the program, our community visits and our evaluations were conducted by our extension professionals. And eventually we flipped the script similar to the model that was just explained and began matching communities and training volunteers from those communities to do those evaluations. This model for us was primarily implemented by Nadine Siegel and perfected by Jan Steen and Nancy Daniels. And we matched cities within a partner community of a similar size, similarly to what has been explained already, often within an hour and a half to 2.5 hour drive across the state. This ensures that our evaluations and our evaluators have a relevant frame on the city size so that we're not thinking from an urban context and asking questions about a more rural community that's maybe smaller with different amenities. And we also have tried to give enough distance so that that first time visitor perspective is true. And folks maybe aren't looking at a community they've seen dozens of times before. To participate in the program, we ask communities to fill out and submit a very simple application form. These are often recommended to communities by our local unit staff in our counties and our districts, by our Kansas Community Empowerment Program representatives or board members, or sometimes we'll solicit an application from a community as state specialists to make a good match with a community we know we have in the pipeline. Oops. Participants become secret shoppers, similar to what has already been described. And sometimes I want to address the cost to the community a little bit and part of why we're not charging a fee yet. Sometimes our local convening groups pay for the mileage for travel for our community volunteers. Most often participants are volunteers and they pay for their own mileage and their own meals and things like that when they're out. And we do ask them to try to take a meal in town if that's an available amenity for them when they go visit. We do have some groups that go together, but more often I think it's one-off visitors who visit different days. I think that works a little bit better in our smaller communities where if we show up with 3 cars and a caravan, it's pretty obvious what they're there to do. The guide we give visitors is similar to the one that's already been shared. It ends up being about 6 pages long. We do a 5-minute impression. I'm going to talk about that here in just a second. We ask for some of the similar information that's already been kind of talked about a little bit. We do train our teams to really look at a few specific areas: entrances and exits, community appearance, retail and industrial economic development opportunities that they see, public services, including healthcare and childcare. Those are hot topics in Kansas right now. So we're asking for a little bit of extra focus on that. And then the online presence and any census data they're able to find. We don't ask our community volunteers to do a deep dive in the census, but we do ask them to do a little bit of searching ahead of time so they can kind of anticipate what they might see. I really like the 5-minute impression part of our project program, giving folks the opportunity to just drive through town for 5 minutes. And sometimes that's all it takes to get from side to side of a town. Sometimes it's just enough to get down the main thoroughfares. just kind of capturing and then stopping what I've seen in those first 5 minutes, thinking that if I'm a visitor who isn't going to stop, 5 minutes is probably all I've been willing to commit to our town. Sometimes we find that there are things mentioned in reports that volunteers turn in that they don't capture photos of that we want to make sure we include in the presentation back, or we find that the photos that our volunteers have taken aren't of a quality that can be used in the presentation. And in that case, we'll typically have a specialist go back and take more pictures so that we know that we've got a good, robust amount in the presentation that we're doing. During our training, we stress that we need individual reports from each visitor so that we can look for themes and trends across all of the reports as we're presenting that information back. We also let visitors know that we will compile the reports for them. So we want like I just said, an individual report from each of our visitors. And then we also stress that we want them to be very wordy in the descriptions that they give to us, very descriptive. Don't hold back on what you don't like and give us a lot of details about the things that you do like. Don't just say that something was okay or nice or bad. Sometimes, though, we just don't get enough information from our visitors, in which case, again, we can call in our local unit staff to go do a follow-up, or we'll send our specialist back to do a visit. Following the visit, our first impressions reports are compiled and exchanged with the sister community or the partner community. These reports are written. They typically contain all of the data and the comments that have been made. We try not to soften things too terribly much, although there have been times where we have given a report back to city administration, let's say first before we do a public report and post something online, and have been asked to take some data out of that public report. And have handled that in a couple of different ways. We don't want to be name calling out specific businesses in town, but we do want to make sure that that data goes where it needs to go so that changes can be made if our visitors have had a poor experience. The reports we give typically don't contain pictures, which is why we put the presentations online. And then a town meeting is typically arranged where the results are shared with the broader community. This is typically done with a presentation that does include those pictures, and those illustrated observations are made. Typically, following these reports, action planning is the next step. Identifying specific issues to address, working with communities. And we are always encouraging folks to make sure that they're including their local officials and other community leaders. Usually we ask for a sponsorship or some kind of a community organization you're working with when you request a first impressions. We, like you, work really hard to be flexible and adjust to meet our stakeholder needs. So we have pivoted when appropriate. For instance, one of our extension board members, who also sits on our state extension advisory committee, worked with the local unit director in Salina, Kansas for a very special North Salina corridor first impression. So in that case, we didn't match them with another community. We didn't have one in the pipeline, but Jan enlisted the help of our state specialists and some of the directors from our urban communities to do that first impression. We were given a map with very specific streets we were supposed to look at, and we visited over the course of 2 months' time. Several years ago, we did a first impressions for Junction City, Kansas, with volunteer teams from Fort Riley, who we trained to conduct evaluations with the intent of helping Junction City understand how they were being viewed by military families and personnel in light of comparisons that they might be making from other installations in the U.S. or abroad and other duty stations at which they had served. Jan also matched across state lines for an exchange between Kearney, Nebraska and Hays, Kansas. And you can probably guess what the commonality was for those two communities. They're both regional university towns. Historically, some of our specialists have offered to do go-backs after a community has worked on some of the suggestions to the visitors. And we have hashed this out as a state team on how we want to handle this. We've done 2 go-backs so far in communities. The one I have listed here is from Lyons, Kansas, and it was one of those situations where we'd lost some of the historical memory on the first round of first impressions and needed to go back and provide that same feedback. In another community in Kansas, we sent visitors back, and frankly, they saw the same things that the first visitors had seen. So we are now recommending that we'll have a state specialist come in, maybe our facilitation team, do some ripple effects mapping, because we don't want our communities to lose heart when they've gone and made a lot of adjustments, but maybe they aren't the adjustments that the visitors are being impacted by. The First Impressions program is nested within our community assessment signature action plan, and all of our surveys and stories are captured as part of that action plan in pairs. We do have standard assessments as part of that action plan that can be tailored for each community. And we do have other assessments that we're offering as part of this assessment plan, our signature plan. But frankly, First Impressions has been our bread and butter for years. As of February 2026, we've completed 154 reports with a total of 157 projected by late March of this year. That reaches about 25% of all 625 incorporated cities in Kansas. And we know that the program's highly scalable. We've served populations reaching from Junction City, which is 22,900, to Long Island, Kansas, population 131. Now that's rural. A recent application of the program in our Central Kansas Extension District demonstrates kind of how that path works from the assessment to the next steps into the action. Delphos Alive collaborated with Extension professionals for a visitation swap with McFarland, Kansas. We did a public readout session for 67 residents to help us review the findings, and 82% of those participants reported that the process had helped them identify specific community priorities. Some of the actionable outcomes from that were funding and grant requests that they successfully pursued to put in a new community splash pad, an upgraded AV system in their local auditorium, and a local food truck rotation and business relocation support. All of that work was aided and augmented by the First Impressions report that we gave them. Our analysis of the program shows that there's really two critical elements for a successful First Impressions initiative, and they've already been touched on. The first is the power of visual evidence. Showing photos of a town, both the positive and the neglected, is definitely a catalyst for change. We do share a lot of statistical data with our communities. We do a deep dive on a lot of statistics, but we know that it is truly the pictures and comments that have impact. And it's the words that really can serve these communities, and seeing how other people are seeing their communities that creates that emotional and logical drive for improvement. The second is local accountability. The report itself is just that starting point. So we know that any action forward is going to require a community champion or a local group like Delphos Alive to take the ownership of the findings and then seek funding, drive the projects forward, maybe develop a strategic plan. So we know that having that local accountability is a key to success. To keep our internal K-State team organized, we do have a Teams channel where we house all of our files, our videos, anything that we need, pictures, you can go out to our Teams channel and find there on our internal side so that we're able to transition the program well over time. And as we forecast the future of First Impressions in Kansas, we know that our success is going to hinge upon local unit agent involvement. As we have scaled back our specialist numbers, if we continue to do First Impressions, it really is going to take a system-wide buy-in from our staff, and we will need to be able to empower our local unit staff to take pictures, help with compiling reports, and maybe potentially deliver the results to communities, although maybe not in their own communities. Our system has made investment really broadly in building capacity and facilitation with our local unit staff to the point where we have a regional facilitation team. Each of our sections of the state has a team that we know we can call on to guide those conversations, and present some of that difficult to hear data. So it's not just the specialist standing there, but we've got some facilitated dialogue around the report that we're giving. And I suspect we're going to start leaning a lot more heavily on our facilitation team as we go forward. And we've recently developed a placemat that our community members can interact with as they're hearing the data so that they can start thinking and having conversation. And it's not just an expert standing up there providing pictures and data, but we're really engaging with our stakeholders to start to move forward from our community assessment action plan to our community coaching and support action plan. We do share resources with communities when we do our readouts, including our grant writing classes, our newcomers events, the Rural Grocery Initiative, the Remote Online Initiative, and again, the skills of our facilitation team to help keep the conversation moving forward with strategic planning. Additional developments we'd like to see. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of the things that are going to get shared a little bit later. We would really like to pursue including offering a first impressions or visitor experience type program specifically around community events that are often part of a community's culture. We're specifically thinking about those long-standing 100-year-old events, Oktoberfest, Rockathons, hamburger feeds, celebrations, things like that, that are really popular locally, but maybe the whole state doesn't have a word about, or maybe they're things that, leadership is changing over, and this would be a great time to do a first impression from a brand new visitor's perspective to help give feedback on here's how that event could be just a little bit better. We've talked about this as a partnership with our Convention and Visitors Bureaus in different counties and also our state tourism team from our Department of Commerce. And our hope is that we'll have an opportunity to sit with even smaller groups and communities, the ones that are planning these events, to talk about how do we start spiraling up some of that social capital, because we know that's the one that can really have an impact on some of the other community capitals. As always, we encourage our communities to be curious. We encourage you to be curious about first impressions. If you see something, ask why, ask what we're doing. We're happy to share with you. And I'm just going to wrap up by saying thanks for visiting and listening a little bit about our program. You're awesome.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Really appreciate it. Next, we have Ann Vogelbacher, who's going to join us from Iowa State. And I'll preface by saying, while she gets her slides up, that the NCRCRD for the past couple of years has had an extension implementation grant available to all the extension services in the North Central region. And Iowa State decided to take advantage of that opportunity. And here is some of the results. So, Ann, go ahead and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much. And just a quick check, you can all see my slides, correct? All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to be part of our panel today. In Iowa, we've built and scaled up our First Impressions program, which we refer to as FIT, in just 2 years. And I'm really excited to share some of our highlights with you. First of all, why FIT? My predecessor, Diane Van Weingarten, who many of you may know, retired this summer. But prior to her retirement, she and I were both at an industry meeting in the fall of 2023 when the idea of offering a community assessment program first came up. Travel Iowa, which is our state tourism office, they were interested in partnering to create a program that would enhance tourism readiness and strengthen Iowa's rural communities. So, with that in mind, Diane and I set out to create a comprehensive community assessment program that also included a strong tourism component. And this has truly grown into a collaborative partnership with Iowa State University and Travel Iowa. I also wanted to share a couple of acknowledgments in starting up FIT in Iowa. Diane was very familiar with other states' First Impressions programs, and she'd actually attended a session at an extension conference that was led by Andy Northrup, who you'll hear from in a moment, with Michigan State University. So then, as was mentioned, Diane applied for, and we were very fortunate to receive that $5,000 grant to help bring Andy to Iowa to share the program that they do and help train our assessment team members. That training was so very, very valuable. It gave us the chance to learn directly from Michigan's years of experiences, what worked well, what to avoid. That insight truly helped shape our program, and I think it's a great example of our topic today about first impressions being freely shared and widely adapted. Some of the things that are unique to Iowa, as I mentioned, FIT is an Iowa State University program, but we've offered that through our partnership with Travel Iowa. We piloted FIT in 2024 with 2 communities, Corning and Maquoketa. We do in Iowa have a community participation fee. In 2024 and 2025, that participation fee was $2,000. And then we're planning to increase that this current year up to $2,500. per community. In 2025, we added 5 additional communities to those initial pilots, including Manning, Perry, Webster City, Independence, and Washington. And we'll be selecting 5 more communities, and our applications for 2026 are actually due later on today. Since piloting FIT, we've generated over $314,000 in program revenue from our partners. Wanted to share a screenshot of our website. Our FIT program information lives here, including our application form. As I mentioned, we do have an application process. It's due annually. And then our community reports are all posted there if you want to check those out. Ways we've adapted first impressions in Iowa. Our assessment teams include 4 to 6 assessors per community, and that number is determined by the needs of each community. Something unique to our teams is Travel Iowa always provides at least 1 staff member for each assessment team. And then the rest of those team members come from Iowa State's Community and Economic Development staff members. I'm so very grateful to our CED and Travel Iowa colleagues for sharing their expertise as part of our assessment teams. Their insights truly allow us to deliver assessments that reflect each community's unique challenges, strengths, and opportunities. We make sure that all of our teams have varied demographics. We have team members that come from anywhere from Gen Z to baby boomers, along with different travel parties. Because in our case, with our tourism focus, we want to make sure that we're capturing a variety of experiences, including families, couples, multi-generational. This year we had a mom, child, and grandma traveling together as an assessment team, along with solo travelers, which is a new travel trend. Our visits take place over a span of 4 to 6 months. All of our assessors travel independently to each community. They also travel incognito and they come to the community unannounced so that they can have those experiences that are truly authentic. We do have our team members, though, coordinate with each other to make sure that they're not all spending time the same weekend. So we are able to span that out over 4 to 6 months, ranging from starting in the spring on through the summer. Our assessment team members also complete what we call profile form, and that really allows us to tailor our teams towards what the communities need. So in a couple of examples, this year we had a community that has this great river that flows through their entire community. It also connects their community to a state park about 8 miles out of town that's got a wonderful Frank Lloyd Wright home that's able to be toured. And that assessment team member was chosen. One of them was chosen because of their experience with paddling and river recreation. And their experiences and comments were just very, very invaluable to our recommendations that we left with that community. Another of our communities this year it's the hub for 2 major trails in Iowa. And we have an assessment team member that has led bicycle trips all around the world. And he actually conducted his entire assessment by bicycle, arrived in the community, did all of the activities and things in the community on his bike, and then departed the community. All because we wanted to be able to provide that community with information about how trail users can navigate within their community. Can they find the restaurants? Can they find the attractions? Can they do those types of connections within the community so they can truly leverage that asset within their community? Our assessment process really includes 3 phases: the pre-visit, the on-site visit, and then post-visit discussions. The assessment team data then is analyzed to form that comprehensive community report with actionable recommendations to enhance community vitality, elevate visitor experiences, and improve overall quality of life in our communities. The pre-visit process begins with onboarding of our team members. We identify and share with them the challenges that the communities have shared with us, along with a series of what the community feels are their must-see items to make sure that we can be covering those. Our team members also conduct extensive online research, exploring and evaluating the community, much like a visitor would do when they're planning to go on a trip. On average, our assessors spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours with that research. And then they also plan out their trip plan, their tentative agenda for their visit. And again, like I said, we coordinate within our teams as far as scheduling, also making sure that we cover those must-see things that the community has shared with us. The actual on-site visit, as I mentioned, our assessment team members are embedded in our communities. They typically spend 24 to 32 hours within the community. And that on-site assessment includes, much as has been discussed earlier, those initial impressions. We're also capturing, can they find visitor information about things to do? They're engaging with frontline staff to see about referrals and recommendations, and also looking at, from an assessor perspective, what are the motives? Why are people coming to that community for travel? We assess overall community assets from wayfinding and community entryways and residential, along with specific tourism assets, including historic sites, outdoor recreation, and specific business and locations that the assessors are experiencing, from lodging to eating and dining and all of those unique experiences that the community has to offer to visitors. And then also some lasting impressions of the community, reflecting upon those lasting impressions that the community leaves with a visitor. Next, within our post-visit, we ask our committee members to provide actual suggestions and resources specific to the community. And then they also enter all that data along with photos that reinforce their assessor observations, and all of that information is uploaded into Qualtrics. Then we meet as an assessment team to debrief about everyone's experiences in their community. And that is so amazingly helpful. Those conversations are incredibly valuable as I work on writing up the reports and the recommendations, which are then presented at a community forum. Our assessment team members are always invited to attend the community forum if their schedule allows. This year, we had at least one staff person from Travel Iowa at all of our forums, and then some of our CED team members were able to attend as well. So, what does First Impressions in Iowa look like from the community's perspective? Again, it's an application process. And once selected, we also ask them to form what we call a local leadership team. We have that community onboarding meeting with them and talk about the program, gather more specific information about the community's challenges and issues so that we can really tailor that assessment to the community. They also work to plan, promote, and host their community report forum. That forum is open to the public, but then that local team also is charged with making sure that they're inviting their stakeholders and business people and folks that are important to their community. After the forum, it's up to that local team to determine their next steps and what projects they may want to pursue based on the recommendations. And then, of course, they're also tasked with remaining in contact with us through our evaluation process. And we have plans for post years 1 and year 3 for evaluations with our FIT communities. I wanted to share a couple of photos from community forums. And at that forum, we present our initial findings at that public forum. Earlier in the day, I meet with the local team where we share the initial hard copy of their report for them to review. It's typically around 60 to 70 pages long, so we give them some time to review that and then finalize that report, typically within about a month post-community forum. At the forum, though, we also do a community engagement activity. As attendees arrive, we hand them a clipboard that has some post-it notes on it. And we ask them to share what they feel are the top 3 things in the community that they'd recommend to visitors. And then later on in the forum, we compare with what our assessors identified as those top tourism assets as to compared to what locals express are their top assets. There's also time at the end of the forum for that local leadership team to share what are the next steps and how stakeholders and community members can become involved with the efforts to keep the momentum going. So, what are the deliverables of First Impressions? It's that community report, and that's posted to the CED website. That's that public-facing community report. We also provide a separate resources report, typically 4 to 6 additional pages that detail grants, other funding sources, and technical assistance specific to that community. In addition to those reports, though, we also prepare asset-specific reports for all the locations that we visited. And that includes lodging, shopping, the attractions and events, and eating and drinking. These supplemental asset reports provide additional details that just aren't appropriate maybe to include in the public-facing community report, but it gives the leadership team the opportunity to be able to share that detailed or candid feedback that may be helpful to individual businesses or attractions. We also provide ongoing support. I've written letters of support for grant applications based on recommendations from our FIT assessments. We also provide assistance if communities are looking at improving their community gateway. We have a program that can help with things like that or other technical assistance. So we just begun the evaluation process with our 2 pilot communities. So I wanted to share a few of the impacts that we're already seeing. We started the evaluation last month, and in the community of Maquoketa, they have some great assets. They've got a local brewery, a wonderful nature center, some great shopping, and a strong agritourism component. Plus, they have these amazing caves in Maquoketa State Park, which is 8 miles out of town. And part of their challenges they wanted to do was how can they attract more visitors from the caves to their community. So some of the things are only a year that they're already pursuing. They've strengthened their digital presence. The Maquoketa Chamber and the City of Maquoketa are partnering to create a unified visitor-focused website, and they've also secured grant funding to support that project. They're enhancing their wayfinding systems. They're redesigning some community map kiosks they have to make navigation much easier. We shared some suggestions from our assessment about ways that they could improve that and also create a more welcoming, intuitive visitor experience. They've expanded the visitor information access, increasing the visibility and distribution of materials out at that Maquoketa State Park at high traffic locations. And they're also engaging youth. They're partnering with a local innovation center to involve youth in developing a community app. So I love this quote that our state tourism office ran in a recent e-newsletter because we don't want this to be a report that sits on the shelf somewhere. We want it to drive recommendations into action. And in the case of Webster City, it really has energized their community. Their local team continues to meet. In the past, they had not been getting together regularly, and it really reaffirmed some of the work that was underway. They're using the FIT report to kind of create their whole action plan for the coming year, and it really has become a great stepping stone for them. So, what's next? We were asked by our state tourism office to present a session on our FIT program at our tourism conference next month. And we'll have representatives from our two pilot communities, Corning and Maquoketa, on a panel along with myself, sharing out how they've used FIT in their communities, what they learned, how they're changing, again, really putting those plans into action. We're ready to get going with our 2026 application review and program year. And then we continue to receive requests from communities that are larger than our current organizations. Right now, our population cap is 20,000 and under, and we continue to get requests from communities asking for their assistance with FIT. And so we'd like to really grow that and be able to service some larger communities, but we just don't currently have that capacity. So my contact information is here. I'll also drop links into the chat box in a moment that has our website. Also, that grant, an article the NCRCD did on the $5,000 grant that we received.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's amazing, incredible what you guys have been able to accomplish over the past couple of years. Really appreciate you sharing that with us. For those of you that attend our webinars quite frequently, you know that they're often 60 minutes. This one is special. It's 90 minutes long. And so hopefully everyone will be able to hang out with us here for the remaining 33 minutes. We'll get a chance to hear from Andy Northrup from Michigan State, and we'll also be able to answer your questions. So hold on tight. You can start putting your questions into the chat if you wish. And Andy, go ahead and take it away.
All right, good. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Ann. I'm Andy Northrup with Michigan State University Extension. Makes great logical sense to follow Ann's path here because how they do first impressions tourism FIT, which is what we also call it here in Michigan, is how we do it. So we've had tremendous success with our FIT program dating all the way back to 2016 when we adopted the framework from a a Northeast regional grant, similar to the one that funded me to go to Iowa and train Ann and her team. And our program was adopted from West Virginia and a composition of other materials from Minnesota as well. And over the years, I've noticed opportunities to take our FIT program and roll it out and scale it up. And so in the last 2 years, a colleague of mine, Garrett Ziegler, and we kind of put our heads together and we rolled something out here called our Rural Tourism Assessment Program. And it's a 4-phase program. Don't bother trying to read the fine print there. I will move to some other slides here that will elaborate on our 4-phased approach to rural tourism using the FIT program. We got started coming out of COVID with an opportunity with a county in Michigan, Roscommon County. They had, like many other counties across the country, had ARPA dollars, American Recovery dollars, and they had been watching very closely what I'd been doing with our FIT program for the previous few years, minus the 1 year we had to take off because of the pandemic. But Roscommon County, like many of the counties that we do our FIT program in, had a need and still does have a need to strengthen its small town rural tourism economy. Our FIT program, just in general, we don't do the community to community exchange. We will do it. It is offered to communities. What we do is something called the expert model, which is what Ann talked about, and some other states in the Northeast use that framework well, where we build our own teams through MSU Extension colleagues and other partnering organizations. And we go into the communities unannounced but invited and conduct the assessments ourselves. And of course, have a very similar framework that Iowa adopted from us that we deploy when doing that. But the idea for the rural tourism assessment was to meet a county's needs using and capturing first-time visitor perspectives. And this, to best of my knowledge, has not been undertaken. And if it has, I certainly would like to hear from other colleagues at other land grant universities if anybody has scaled this up to county level. Not an easy undertaking, and certainly scaling up doesn't always equate to success, but we were able to check that box here working with Roscommon County. So it was a 2-year process. Just for context, Roscommon County is pretty much central Lower Peninsula, Michigan. It is a heavily touristed area, but when compared to other major destinations in the state, it does not come out on top. But regardless, it is more of a county with destinations that have like large historical visitations, legacies of families continually going back to the same place over and over again, whereas more major destinations in the state would see visitors from different countries and different states, whereas this part of the state is predominantly, I would say, visited by Michiganders. So we took our First Impressions Tourism Assessment Program, and I've been working with the Roscommon Economic Development Corporation, along with Garrett's help, for the better part of a year. And we crafted this into a 4-phased approach. And our traditional FIT program is 2 phases. And it sits sort of in the middle there, phase 2 and phase 3. What differentiates FIT from the rural tourism assessment is that we tacked on a planning and asset identification workshop on the front end, heavily engaging stakeholders in Roscommon County, along with their community leadership teams, which is what, of course, we require for FIT assessment as well. And the objectives, as you can see, were to bring those leaders and stakeholders together on the front end of the process across the county and participating communities into a sort of a collective asset identification process. We also wanted to give those stakeholders an opportunity for them to generate questions, county visioning questions, that first-time visitors during phase 2 would ask. So our FIT program, much like Iowa's, is hyper-focused on an individual community, as it is in many other states as well. In order to scale up at a county level, to have that collective vision of a county experience, we had to tap the stakeholders to tell us what it is that they wanted visitors to say about the county. And how do you know you're in that county, and the identification behind a county? And traditionally, we see identification, community identification, really rest on an individual community within that, but we were looking at a much larger scale. In addition to that asset identification workshop, we had to have, because of the scaling up, we had to have stakeholders point us in the direction of assets that stood out to them because of the huge swath of land. We're talking, 24,000 square miles or something to that effect. And so knowing ahead of time what assets stood out to stakeholders would help us sort of chart a course, because we were taking our First Impressions Tourism Assessment Program, which normally is a 24 to 36-hour assessment, and we were scaling it up to reach county needs. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looked like. But traditionally, we form 5-person teams, and we go into communities unannounced but invited, and have a comprehensive community assessment tool that looks at a wide range of assets, very similar to what some other states have talked about, almost identical to Iowa. The FIT program, we focus on the first 3 bullet points with communities, getting them to learn about their assets and opportunities. We really strive to strengthen an existing cohort of leaders ahead of the assessment to begin with, so there's chances of success once we're done with the program increases and multiplies by having a cohort of group on the front end, right? Having buy-in, that should come naturally probably to each of these programs across the country. And then we develop a list of action items for community improvements, right? And we focus the latter 3 bullet points, we leave up to the communities to integrate those action items into community plans, zoning ordinances, marketing plans, and take action on community improvements. And we use the program ultimately to improve the well-being and quality of life for residents. We do not navigate from that, as well as visitors. And we use the tool for not only a population retention program and growth program, but also for a visitor attraction, which in turn is used as a mechanism to attract talent as well as future residents. So we took the fit model and the 37 seconds I just gave it there, and we scaled it up. And as I said earlier, that was not an easy undertaking to reach a county focus. We developed through phase one 10 county assessment questions that had never been a part of our fit assessment tool to begin with. We condensed our fit assessor manual that Iowa uses, and we borrowed from other states on the East Coast, from 80 questions to 25, hyper focusing on certain areas within that model. And then we allocated significant travel budgets through American Recovery Reinvestment dollars, allocating almost $1,000 to each of our assessment team members, spending 3 nights, 4 days in the county, each of us. So that equated to roughly 15 nights, almost 20 days on the ground, spread out across, say, 6 weeks is what we gave them. We did a rotational overnight stay to hit the communities that participated to spread out the data sets evenly. We had 3 communities within Roscommon County participate. These 3 communities, just to give context, are the 3 primary tourism communities, if not the only ones. I mean, every community gets visitors, but it's those 3 in particular that were targeted along with that whole geographic area as well. And so to reach that swath of land, we had to extend our traditional fit model to multiple days on site, 3 nights, 4 days. I think one of our assessors ended up staying 4 nights due to bad weather. So much like fit in general, we have with the rural tourism assessment, we have a 3rd phase. In a traditional fit program, this would be the 2nd phase and final phase. We merged results from phase one and phase two and shared. So we're looking at what stakeholders think are their priority assets and then comparing those, what the visitors during phase two had to say, and we're merging that data and sharing those in community report forums. We do community forums for every fit assessment. They are open to all because we're federally funded. They're never closed door events. We regularly see anywhere from 80 to well into 120, 130, sometimes 140 people come out. It's not uncommon for us to hear from communities that we don't ever or haven't seen this many people come out to a public meeting in years. I've even heard decades. So in short, that forum 3rd phase is quite significant, not only to get the data out, but also to hear from residents and participate in a process that we, like Iowa does as well, facilitate discussions around assets. When working with Roscommon County and rolling out this rural tourism assessment, historically, we didn't think a 4th phase would be necessary. And Garrett and I began thinking like, you know what, this is such a massive undertaking, and executing this across a county like this, we've got to bring stakeholders back together and not only recap the effort, but focused on insights gained from phase three, those quick wins, assets, needs, and facilitate a community activity planning next step. So having those data sets that popped up in phase three, revisiting those roughly 6 months later with stakeholders that have been engaged from phase one, phase two, phase three throughout the whole process, and then some, right? We picked up new people along the way. Looking at these quick wins, assets, needs, and identifications allowed communities to then hit the ground running with strategic planning efforts that we set them up for. We have a First Impressions Tourism Action Planning Guide that I put together years ago. And we give that as a planning tool for communities to be empowered to then take and build their own next steps, allocating roles, identifying next steps, looking for funding mechanisms, and so forth. So that Rural Tourism Assessment Program, which was completed at the end of 2024, won us a national award just last October at the National Extension Tourism Conference that was held in New Hampshire. As I said, we believe it to be the first scaling up of something of that magnitude, but I believe other states may have attempted something like that. It's gaining attention, of course, in Michigan. There's a QR code there, and I also put a hyperlink in the chat. And we feel this is the next iteration for us for first impressions tourism, putting phase one and phase four on the front and back end of it as well. I think I have about another minute before Q&A starts. I do want to elaborate what we're doing as well with First Impressions itself. Like other states, we've been doing this since 2016, and we've worked with about 30 different communities across Michigan, and we too have support from Michigan Economic Development Corporation funding these in full for select communities. It isn't uncommon for myself to receive phone calls from communities after doing FIT 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years later, wanting us to come back and do it and come back and do another assessment, which I think I heard Kansas talk about. They hear the same thing. And we will do that, but our capacity, like other states, is so tied up in communities that just want an initial assessment that I began rolling out just last year a mechanism for communities that have already done FIT once to now begin collecting their own data, MSU facilitating that. I'd be interested in knowing if any other states are doing that. So Marine City, which is just outside of Detroit along Lake St. Clair and the Great Lakes, they were a FIT community in 2019. And 6 years later, they contacted me and they're still using their report from 2019. And they said, we want to do this again. And I said, let's try to take and cherry pick, say, 10 questions from our FIT survey tool. And over the course of the year, we position QR codes around your town and in your local businesses or wherever the chamber and the city decide is the best fit for the QR codes. And let's watch what happens over the course of the year. So versus you getting in line and waiting for us to come back, let's capture true visitor data over the course of the year. And so we're halfway through this process this year, and we have 40 responses, which is 40 they didn't have before. And they plan to use these data sets after the summer season of 2026 to tip development efforts, right? To actually, because we give 5-person perspectives, which oftentimes is enough to get lots of conversation and action going. But then to make major development efforts, whatever those might be, and whatever the community deems something they want, let's see if a larger data set will tell us anything more. This removes us from having to allocate more capacity to a community that's already done this. We can redirect our capacity to communities that just want a first fit assessment. And time will tell where it goes from here, but we feel like that's the next iteration of the FIT program for us, is then empowering communities to use our tool, collect their own data over the course of the year, and then drive new development. One last slide before I pass it and end it to Q&A. I think we have taken the FIT program and we've applied it to fairs and festivals quietly and unannounced. We haven't broadcasted this as a tool because we just have so much interest in the FIT program and the Rural Tourism Assessment Program. But in 2022, we piloted our Fairs and Festival Assessment, which is rooted in our FIT program, as well as was modeled off some work from West Virginia Extension many years ago as well. And so this is something that we're also doing, and it has been quite profound for the one 4-H youth fair that participated 3 years ago. So if anybody wants to get in contact regarding our fairs and festivals, I'm happy to talk about that a little bit as well. But I'm going to stop there. I think I did it in maybe 7 minutes. I had 5, but that's all I've got, Michael. Back to you,
Great.
Captain.
Yep. Anne and Andy would stay on. We'll open things up for questions. I guess as moderator, I wanted to lift something up just really quick. When I graduated from Purdue and went off into the wild world of extension at the University of Tennessee, two of the people that helped me out immensely when I first started my career was actually Andy Lewis and Greg Wise. And those two were very selfless, I think, in just, Michael, whatever you need, you just let us know. And First Impressions was one of those programs. There was a webinar series that they were just doing for their staff, and they let me in on those. And I appreciate so much the Wisconsin idea and the fact that you've taken that idea and allowed it to permeate in such a powerful program. I mean, hearing from all of these powerhouse universities today and hearing the impact that they're having on a town of 113 people and a town of 22,000 is just really, really incredible. And doing it in a very humble way, I think is neat, but and exciting. However, extension, in order to persist, we can't be the best kept secret. We need to be out in front, and people need to know that it's extension that's galvanizing these great opportunities. And so, I guess the first question I have, whomever wishes to jump in first, is what has First Impressions been like, given the, if you will, humble beginnings of First Impressions? How has it kind of lifted the stature or the public view of extension in those communities? My guess is some of these communities probably said, I didn't even realize extension did this, kind of thing, and that this has broadened their scope or understanding of what extension can bring to the table. If someone wants to take that question and talk about what this means from a public viewpoint, that would be great.
Yes.
Michael, I can wait. Oh,
No, go
I
ahead,
can
Ann.
weigh in real I can weigh in real quickly. I forgot to mention at our public forums, we do always make sure that we loop in our county extension offices, make sure they're invited to that. They know that we're in their communities doing this fit assessment process. Also, our regional directors. And I think what's been really gratifying to me, that quote that I shared from Webster City, but also we've gotten other quotes that are, again, our state travel office is collecting on our behalf, really talking about how impactful the program is for them. And I think our intention is eventually to roll all of that into a larger impact report. So we're excited to begin that work as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Ann. Kristen, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think, for us, it is an on-ramp in two senses. It's great that you shared that Greg and Andy, who are instrumental in so many of our careers as mentors, reached out to you with this program and as you were coming on board. It's an on-ramp for our educators in that, when you're looking from a program manager perspective, when I'm looking for something that an educator can do to immediately make their presence known, that is active and positive within a community, First Impressions is a great program to start with. So it's a great on-ramp for us, and it's not just a start of your career program, it's one that you can do again and again and again, as we clearly see across the presentations today. But it's also an on-ramp for community members. So it's kind of, for a lot of people, their First Impressions experience is their first experience with extension. We oftentimes, and I'm sure this is common across all programs, have people that either come to the presentations or serve as assessment team members that have not previously been involved in extension. So they're getting to know us, they're getting to know the program, they're getting to know the possibilities. And then when this discrete program is over, what you're left with is, to a certain extent, an agenda for community development that both educators and specialists can work with the community. So it's a way of both on-ramp and building a longer-term relationship, or an entree to a longer-term relationship with the community for all involved. It's one of the primary, I think, in addition to the direct community benefits, it's one of the primary organizational and leadership kind of benefits that we can see from the program.
Thank you so much. Andy, do you want to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I'll add the FIT program and the Rural Tourism Assessment Program is part of our government community vitality team, which in Michigan, we're just not known so much for governance and community vitality compared to, say, 4-H and agriculture and health and nutrition, right? And so the FIT program has really set up our land use team and our entrepreneur team and our good governance team, and as well as our food systems teams, to then come in after, should there be a need for them to come in and follow suit. And so when we do our FIT forums, as I said earlier, we're reaching a lot of people. It may not sound like a lot, but in these small town communities of 113, like you joked about, Michael, it is a lot of people, sometimes 10, 15% of the population. And so, hands go up like, well, we didn't know you did that. And so, and then it paves a nice way for future programming, sustainability of extension to continue providing services in the communities afterwards. It's been fascinating.
Thank you, Andy. Are there others that have questions? Again, you can put them in the chat or you can unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hi there, this is Jennifer Anderson from Montana State University Extension Community Vitality. I have a question. I'm an associate specialist in our community vitality program here. We've piloted the program twice in two different communities. And in both places, the need for customer service or a community ambassador type training came up as a high priority in both places. Can anybody speak to that? I haven't found any great resources available, but it is, as we've pursued this, it's become very apparent that this is something we are lacking in Montana, but it is a very high need. So can anybody address this? Has anybody run into this? Do they have a solution or a program that they can share?
Nebraska has a program called the Red Carpet Rollout. You can contact Cheryl. Michael, what's Cheryl's last name?
She was on the call, actually.
Yeah.
Cheryl, are you still on?
Eschbach? No, not Eschbach, but Red Carpet Rollout. So it's a customer service oriented program like you're requesting, and Michigan State is adopting that as well. We're calling it Mitten. Don't ask me what the acronym is, but Garrett's on. He could perhaps elaborate on it. But we're seeing that as well. It's kind of a low-hanging fruit.
And in Wisconsin, our Department of Tourism offers a customer service training program for that reason, because that's your initial contact with the community. And so we do a lot of referrals to that program when we identify it as a need.
In Iowa,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, in Iowa, we do have a customer service and hospitality training program as well. We started it, well, actually, Diane created it, Diane Van Weingarten, a decade ago. And we started it as a pilot with one of our tourism regions and trained 500 people the first year, and then expanded it statewide and trained over 2,000 frontline staff members. It was so popular that we ended up transitioning it to a train the trainer type of program and helping get our county directors trained in delivering that presentation. But we are planning this year to roll that back out to be delivered by CED program specialists, and don't have a huge capacity to be able to do more than a couple sessions per year, but we do have a program that we can provide as a reference for other states if you're interested.
Thank you, Ann. And Jennifer, when it rains, it pours. University of Illinois also has a customer service program. It's quite a good one. And that is actually available for free through the Community Development Extension Library, which is supported by the National Association of Community Development Extension Professionals and the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. So I put that link in the chat as well. So it looks like you have potentially quite a few options to choose from, which is really, really exciting. Nate asked a question earlier. I'll just read it, and whomever wants to jump in can answer it. What do you think about the pros and cons of a program fee, and how do you think about deciding on what the fee is and if there's a fee scale? Who would like to discuss setting your price, if any?
For us, that's an internal campus thing. They expect us to recoup travel costs. Again, we do the expert model, so that's MSU Extension internal staff, of course, traveling across a pretty large state. And so campus expects us to recoup those costs. Of course, there's multiple trips for the people that go back to share the results and things like that. We haven't had any backlash from it. I would just say in short, we've had some of the wealthiest communities in the state balk at $5,000, and we've had some of the poorest communities in the state say, no problem, we'll get it to tomorrow. And, there's innovative ways to fundraise. A lot of our community foundations in Michigan have actually covered costs for communities and so forth. But we're kind of mandated to recoup costs here at Michigan. So,
Yeah, and also just to add on to that, Andy, a lot of the money that we do charge the community for those assessments goes into the pockets of the assessors, who then spend it in those communities at local businesses, either for lodging or restaurants. So it's kind of almost like a little kickback situation. That's a good way to tell communities, like, we're not just taking this money. It is going to be reinvested in your community during the actual assessment.
And did you want to jump in on, and then Todd jump in on the fee? I saw your mic was off.
Sure. Our experience is similar to Michigan, just because of budget times and things. We have to generate that revenue and able to make the program possible.
And I think you said your fee is at $2,500 now.
Yes, $2,500 from community, and then we have our partnership with our state tourism office as well.
Okay. Todd.
Yeah, in Wisconsin this year, in celebration of 35 years, we our state Wisconsin Extension Professionals Group for Community Development put together a scholarship fund so that our colleagues who may not be familiar with a First Impressions program and may or may not have a lot of program activity funds to play with, to give them an opportunity to do this program and encourage them to do the program with some startup money. So we just launched that this year, actually.
Okay. Nate has a follow-up question. Does anyone use a fee scale where communities might pay different amounts depending on certain factors? It doesn't look like it. But I will say that there are so many different First Impressions programs that, Sarah's on from Kentucky. I was going to say Kentucky comes to mind, West Virginia comes to mind. And so I would definitely reach out to the others. Sarah says that it's based on population size, which makes lots of sense. We have about 2 minutes to go, and I wanted to lift this up, if I may, to just close us out. It was Mary Breidenbach's idea to do this. And I appreciate that Mary, she was going through the different websites and things as we do here at the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development. She was like, Wilcox, I think First Impressions is celebrating a birthday. And once we got our abacuses out and figured out that it was 35 years, because that was tough math, I really appreciate Wisconsin saying, absolutely, let's celebrate. And of course, I wish Andy could be here to celebrate it with us. And then you guys were very open to having the other states jump in as well, because you have shared it freely and it has been adapted in so many different ways. And so excited to have Kansas State here and Iowa State and Michigan State here as well. I think it speaks to the North Central region. There are great First Impressions programs out there all over the South as well. I mentioned a couple of them all over the country. Just what a great example of how extension can change the lives of so many through one idea. It sounds like on the back of a napkin over Wisconsin's national beverage there, and we've come up with this. And in the last 35 years, thanks to a great idea and just extension doing what extension does, we've been able to have a huge impact across the country. So excited about all the innovations that have occurred with this program. And I want to encourage everyone to follow up with our speakers and others that have First Impressions programs to learn more and figure out a way that you can bring this exciting program to your state and adapt it to your needs and maybe add some new twists and turns and innovations to it. I want to thank all of our speakers today. I want to thank all of you for joining us for another exciting NCRCRD webinar, and we look forward to seeing you next month in March. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care and be well.